Good morning, everyone. It is Wednesday, our asynchronous day, and I do have one small assignment for you guys to complete. You can find it on Classroom. If you go to classwork and then you go to week 5, empathy and lost at sea, there is a assignment that has the question mark because it's a discussion question where you will type an answer. And what I'm asking you to do is write an analogy to explain how Odysseus would feel in one of two situations. I've given you a sentence starter to help you come up with your analogy. But first, we need to make sure we know what an analogy is. Most classes I was able to go over this. I think there was only one where I was not. But if you were absent or you need the refresher, let's take a minute to review what an analogy is. So, an analogy, and this should go in your notebook. You can add a slide, type the word analogy. You can right click, like I've shown you in class, to get the definition. And when you do, the definition will say a comparison between two things, typically for the purpose of explanation or clarification. So we use an analogy when we compare one thing to another thing to try to explain the first thing. So that's kind of an abstract explanation, but I'm going to give you some examples that will hopefully make it clear. This is a real example that I found on Moreland Avenue last year. This was something someone had painted on the side of the road, and someone had done a visual analogy comparing Trump's response to COVID to a sports game. And so they basically made a what looks like a scoreboard that said COVID-19, Trump 0. So they were comparing Trump's response to COVID-19 to a sports competition and showing that Trump was losing. So that's just like a real life example I literally found on Moreland. All right, so here are some examples of written analogies. Returning to school in person this year feels like I moved away for a year and just now moved back. So I was trying to explain how I feel about coming back to school in person, and I was comparing it to like, it honestly feels like I moved away for a year, did something completely different, and now I'm just back. It's a strange feeling. I also wrote an analogy about how it feels waking up on a Monday morning. Waking up in the morning on a Monday feels like being interrupted during a satisfying nap. You're all happy, you're asleep, you wake up and you're like, oh, that's how it feels to me. So hopefully, maybe you're a little happier about waking up on Mondays. All right, now to tie it into what we're doing for this assignment. I want you to pick one of these situations Odysseus found himself in book 5. So in book 5, we see Odysseus leaving Calypso's island after 7 years.
Calypso?
Yes, my son's in the room. It's a different Calypso, Harrison. We also see him arriving on dry land after 20 days at sea. So what I'm asking you to do is to compare these situations to a situation either you might experience or someone might experience today. Here are the sentence starters. Leaving Calypso's island after 7 years, Odysseus feels like, and you would compare it to a person who would feel similarly. The common example that came up in class is maybe someone who has been released from jail. And that is a very literal comparison, but you could also think a little bit more metaphorically. What's a situation where you might feel trapped? And you might not literally be trapped for 7 years, but like what's a situation that someone might really want to get out of? Because Odysseus really wanted to get out of his situation. So that's a sentence starter. You're going to fill it in with your comparison. If you would rather, you can also do this situation. Arriving on dry land after 20 days at sea, Odysseus feels like, and then compare to a situation. So imagine that someone is in the ocean for 20 days trying to get to land. They're on a little raft. What's a situation that we can compare to that a person might really be in? There are actual situations where a person might find themselves like that, like someone who's fleeing a country and trying to sail somewhere else, someone who's been shipwrecked. That would be a literal example. But, what's an example where someone might be struggling for a period of time, and how would they feel when they finally achieve their goal. And so that is our analogy assignment. I want you to post your analogy on Classroom today, and I will give you feedback. So if you're really nervous and you're thinking, I can't do this, just go ahead and post your analogy. And if you completely mess it up, I'll just give you some feedback to get you in the right place so that you can write a better one. Okay, I hope everyone has a great Wednesday, and I will see you tomorrow.